Retro.
Yeah.
Electro. Tech.
Oh yeah.
Hey, turn the lights back on. Wow. Retro Electro Tech. When real audio ruled the world.
Well, hello there once again, ladies and gentlemen. This is Retro Ernest of Retro Electrotech. And here on the bench is these Pioneer CS99s. Speakers, of course, as you can see. And I did an evaluation video maybe a few weeks or so back, something like that. And I would have got these done a little sooner, but apparently my order didn't go through. So, anyways, as you can see, I got the replacement caps laid out there. Obviously, I got them in, but apparently what happened was I didn't process the order. I didn't hit the final button or something like that because I was wondering why I didn't get an acknowledgement. Of course, I wondered this probably about a week after the fact. I was wondering why the order wasn't on its way and why I didn't get some kind of acknowledgement. So that's why. Apparently I didn't finish processing the order, so not the fault of the seller. It's my own, but I bring that up because, like I said, these would have been done sooner. Oh well, things happen. Anyways, the name of the game here, and I mentioned this in the initial evaluation video, is that I'm going to recap the boards, okay, the crossover boards. And while I'm at it, of course, check all the connections, all the soldering, and make sure that everything is okay with the jacks. So there's two ways to hook up to these speakers. There's the 1/4-inch jacks, and then there's some binding posts. Now the 1/4-inch jacks, I just got to get those cleaned out and make sure that those little pieces of spring metal, the spring metal contacts, are kind of bent over a little bit, so that when you stick the 1/4-inch plug up in there, you know, it locks in tightly, okay? Or as the Germans say, guten tight. Yeah. So as long as that's okay, good. And then make sure that the contact area of the binding post is all nice and clean, no problems there. So in other words, that the jacks are okay, clean, good connectivity, all that, good connections throughout. And as far as the speakers up in here, we have our spade connections. I pointed that out as well. So the spade terminals, spade plugs. So I'm just going to go through and make sure that I'll let voicemail answer that. But anyways, I'm just going to go through and make sure that I have good connections. If any of those little spade plugs are loose, you can just very gently, like with a pair of needle nose pliers, you can go ahead and just give them a very, very gentle little squeeze. And not too much. You don't want to crush them, and then just make sure that they pop back on, you know, nice and tight, that there's a good firm connection. And while I'm at it, I'll get some swabs and alcohol, whatever, clean up all the spade terminals, all the connections, just do my due diligence and make sure I have clean and tight connections all throughout, because there's a lot of little plugs in there. And again, just make sure that all my connections are good on the jacks, and you know, that the connections of these switches as well on the crossover, there's those level switches. It's all about connections on these. And then I will wrap it up with some final testing, of course, and make sure that we have good connectivity, that the signal isn't, you know, we don't have signals dropping in and out and all that stuff, and, you know, fickle behavior with these speakers. And other than that, they'll be good to go. So what I'm not going to do is I'm not going to show the desoldering of every lead and all that. I'm just going to pop back in here and there, show the progress as I'm moving through. And, you know, of course, when everything is done, I'll show you guys how everything came out, how everything's laid out, and then again the final testing. So let me go ahead and get to that. Okay, so the recap is underway, as you can see. Obviously, these film caps are considerably bigger than the other caps over here, so that's fine. They're, you know, I'll get them all squeezed onto the board and all that. In fact, this is a pretty big, this 20 mic film cap. It's pretty big. You can kind of use it as the equivalent of brass knuckles, but cap knuckles, you know, you can cap slap somebody, whatever, but, or not, but hey, yeah, they're pretty big. Yeah, let me actually zoom in a little bit. So there you go, a little bit more up close and personal, and yeah, I'm putting some spaghetti on all the leads as well, just kind of dressing up everything nicely and gluing them down as I go. So yeah, everything's coming along good. I'll pop back in when I get both boards completed and go from there. Okay, now these switches, I already cleaned the other switches on the other speaker, but I'm on these now. So I just want to throw out a few options that you have with these type of switches, and part of what I'm saying has to do with the construction of the switches, because some of them are stacked, you know, they're multi-wafer switches. They're all stacked, and the way that they're assembled and all that, the way that they're assembled is going to, of course, determine whether or not you can pull the switch apart. On really complex, you know, wafer switches that have a lot of contacts on, on both sides of the discs, and a lot of wiring soldered on and all that, they're a bear to work on if you had to pull them out and, desolder everything, pull them out, disassemble them, and that's, if they could be disassembled, fairly straightforward without damaging the switch. A lot of them could be taken apart, but again, it's something that would be a very time-consuming job. But your first option, let me just put it this way, your first option in cleaning these switches like I'm doing right now, because this switch, or these switches, aren't too bad. When I initially put signal into these speakers and was rotating these switches around, they seemed like they were doing okay. They certainly were a little bit dirty, but still the contacts were in good contact with one another between the non-movable contacts, these little non-movable contact fingers or whatever, against the movable. You see I'm rotating the movable disc, and the movable disc has, you see if I place these between the movable contacts here, or non-movable contacts between these two, here and here, you can see this movable finger here, this little finger contact there. All right, and if I set it right between the two, okay, you can see what I'm talking about. So, obviously these movable fingers here need to be in contact with these non-movable little fingers there. So anyways, that's what I mean, is that contact seems to be good on these switches, and yeah, sometimes it's just a matter of working them, because when these contacts are in contact with one another, when you're moving them back and forth, they're scrubbing against each other, and that's the hopes with a contact cleaner. So if I spray my contact cleaner on, I'm relying on / hoping that that's going to be enough to scrub out a little path between the contacts, that they're rubbing against each other with the help of the contact cleaner. They're scrubbing a nice conductive path, and there's, loosening up any tarnish or oxidation, and reestablishing a good, reestablishing good connectivity. All right. But when they get really bad to that point where they're badly oxidized or badly tarnished and the contact cleaner's not enough, well, my next attempt would be to use some Tarnex on a brush. I would just use a little tiny paintbrush and dip it in the Tarnex and just brush it on, and while the Tarnex is nice and wet, I would start rotating this so that the really bad tarnish or whatever other crap would just kind of melt away, because that's what the Tarnex does. It just kind of dissolves, sort of melts away, and it's pretty fast acting. You might have to put on a few applications, keep it wet and rotate it around. And remember, that stuff though, you got to rinse off really good. So I might have a second brush that I dip in something like alcohol or whatever, and you know, brush off. And I would mask around the switch pretty good, and just, especially if I had access. If I didn't have access, well, having access has a lot to do with whether or not you're going to be successful in doing all this. And that's why, at the very least, even if you can't get the switch apart, you might at least have to desolder all the wiring and remove it from the piece of equipment if it's kind of in there tight. Remove it and do this whole process I'm talking about. And you know, so as far as the Tarnex goes, yeah, brush it on, but you know, rinse it off, either a brush with like some alcohol on it and just get all that residual Tarnex off, or you can try to blast it with contact cleaner. And as far as chemical reactions between the Tarnex and the contact cleaner or alcohol, I don't know. I've never had a problem or whatever, but like always, you know, if you're concerned about something, just make sure you're in a ventilated area, as should always be the case when you're working with chemicals, just to be on the safe side in case there's some kind of reaction or something like that. Or even if there's no reaction between chemicals you're using, but just the chemical itself, yeah, you don't want to be breathing in a bunch of crap. So the contact cleaner on these is good enough, is my point. But if I had to do more, or I wanted something with a lot more bite to it and something that's really going to attack the tarnish real good, Tarnex is the stuff. It's great stuff. And I would brush it on the contacts that I have access to. If I had to, again, take the switch apart, if it's one of those types that I could get apart, because there's contacts on the underside, which is not the case with this switch. Fortunately, on this phenolic wafer disc here, on the bottom side, there doesn't appear to be any contacts. I looked with a flashlight. They're all on the top, so that's great. But if on the bottom side, if the contacts are really hard to get to, that's when you may need to consider taking things apart. And if you're going to be trying to brush in a Tarnex and then have to rinse it out after or whatever, then that, yeah, and that's going to be a big job. I'll tell you right now, because taking all the wiring off, taking the switch out, trying to get it apart, and being careful to, you know, keep all the indexing intact so that you don't reassemble it incorrectly and all that stuff. That's a whole other story. But some switches, even multiple layers, you have enough space in between the sections where you might be able to get a little brush in there with some Tarnex, and then if you have the switch out of the unit and all the wiring off it, you may not even have to take it apart. You could just, after you put in your, you know, brush in your Tarnex and work the switch and, you know, the shaft over and over again, then you might be able to just blast it out with some contact cleaner, or even submerge it in some alcohol or something or whatever, and get off all the residual Tarnex or something like that. So there's a few methods you can do depending on the level of, you know, tarnish and oxidation and how bad they are, especially if you have really fickle contacts and whatnot. But if you could get it all apart, in this case, I don't have to worry on this because, like I said, all the contacts, movable and non-movable contacts, are all on top. But I can, at least on this one, the movable contacts, the little fingers and this metal disc here, I can use one of these jeweler's scratch pins that has the little fiberglass fibers, and you can, am I in frame? Yeah. And you can rotate the top, and, you know, for more or less fibers, but I'll leave it about like so. And I could get in there, especially if I position these. Remember I pointed out these little fingers here on the movable disc. You can see them in between these two. So it's going to be hard to maneuver in here and keep my hand out of the way, but I can use this fiberglass scratch pin here, and just carefully, because I don't want to bend the non-movable contacts. And these scratch pins really do a good job, and I'll just move it along the disc, so I can at least clean half of the contacts, the movable ones, because I have access to them. And you see how that's polishing up real nice with the scratch pin? I mean, it's getting it really good. And I could get in between the non-movable contacts and get all the little movable fingers if I hold it, if I hold the switch so that those little movable fingers are sitting in between the non-movable contacts. You see how clean that's getting? Now, there's not much I could do about the underside of the non-movable contacts. I mean, there kind of is, but I'm not going to get into that because it's a little bit risky. It has to do with very carefully, and I won't get into detail, but just very carefully, like with a little hook like this, very, very carefully lifting the non-movable contact, because there is a certain amount of springiness to the contact, but only a little bit of springiness. I mean, if you bend it way up and expect it to just spring back down onto the contact disc, that ain't going to happen. So it's got a little natural springiness to it, but if you go beyond that, you're going to bend it, and that's not good. So, but you could lift it up just a tiny bit, and if you do that, then you're assuming responsibility on that, because if you screw it up, you screw it up. But there's been a few contacts over time that I've cut a little strip of sandpaper, a little thin strip, and I've lifted up a contact with a hook just a little bit, not beyond its point of springiness, stuck a strip of fine grit sandpaper, like 1,000 grit, whatever, and then laid the contact down on the sandpaper and pulled it out, lifted it just a little bit again, just enough to get the sandpaper under there a little bit, and then pull it out again, just to try to scrub the or polish up the underside of the non-movable contact, if that all makes sense. In most cases, just the scrubbing action between the movable and non-movable contacts, especially with like Tarnex, or if it's not too bad, contact cleaner like I'm doing here, just wetting it down and letting the contact cleaner go to work is fine. In addition to, like I said, in addition to using like a scratch pen to buff out the contact surfaces that you have access to and do all that. So that's what I'm doing with these contacts. And I know that was kind of a bit of an explanation, but yeah, there's different degrees of, cleaning these up. And sometimes too, some people will remove them, and depending, you got to be careful with these phenolic discs, especially the types that are a bit more porous and fibrous and all that. It depends on the switch, but some might opt to put them in like an ultrasonic cleaner. Do your research on that, because ultrasonic cleaners are good in some ways, but if they soak up liquid and they swell, then that can be a really big problem, to say the least. So there you go. So let me go ahead and move on. Okay, so both boards are completed. All the recapping, cleaning of the switches over here and over here. I'll zoom in on this one just a little bit tighter, although I know you guys get the point, but let me go ahead and just do that. All right. So yeah, everything came out really, really nice and clean. Now on this on this board here, I cleaned the inputs and all that, the speaker terminals, really good. I haven't done it on the other one yet, so I'm going to do that on camera, or at least just go over it. Very simple, but for those of you who just want to know this stuff a little bit, I'll go ahead and do that. Okay, so let me maybe kick the exposure up a little bit. So it's not rocket science, guys. It's just, here's the spring contact for the 1/4" jack. So obviously I just want to make sure it's nice and clean. So I'll get a swab, and I have some 99.9% anhydrous alcohol you can use. You can use contact cleaner or whatever. You can even use a little Tarnex on this if it was real bad or something, which this one, you can see, I think you can. You see how dirty that is? You see how much crap is coming off of that? Let me drop the exposure down, because I think if I drop the exposure down, you see that? You see how clean that side of the swab is and how dirty this side is? Yeah, I think you can see that. Now let me kick the exposure back up. All right. So that's why all this stuff needs to be cleaned, So I do believe that that's pretty darn clean. And then I'm going to get the inside of the jack here. This half of it anyways. I'm going to get the other half from the outside. Anyways, these, if you can see them, these are the wires that attach to the binding posts. There's some spring tensioned binding posts to clip your speaker wires onto on the outside. And these are the terminals or screws for those. And I checked the solder joints and all that. They're absolutely bomb-proof. They look good. All the solder joints on these speaker inputs here are intact. I went through and checked all the solder joints throughout. So it's all about good contacts. So there you go. No rocket science to it. And same thing over here from the outside. I'm actually going to use this little micro brush here. Little tiny brush, and same thing, just kind of saturate it. All right, get it nice and wet. Just using some alcohol. You can use contact cleaner, whatever. Yeah, it doesn't matter. And then just get in here and just scrub out this section real good. You know, just get it all cleaned out. Any loose garbage in there, tarnish or, yeah. I mean, it's not that bad in there anyways, but just any little, you know, very light tarnish, a little bit of whatever. Okay. And then let me get a swab and just see if I loosened anything up that was clinging on in there. Yeah, a little bit. There's a little bit of gunk. Not too bad though. Not like that spring contact that I showed you. Spring contact was pretty dirty. But anyways, yeah, this isn't too horrible. And then as far as these goes, you know, you could just unscrew them, and I'll show you what I do with these. I'll just demonstrate on one of them. Let me bring it into view. Okay, so you can see this is one of the little spring posts here. It's got a lot of tension behind it, which is good, so it really holds the speaker wire in place really well. So what I'm going to do here is just, so I don't have to sit here and, you know, hold it with my fingers, because it is pretty tight. There's a lot of tension there. I already have just a padded vice grip that I keep in the shop for numerous things. I already have it adjusted, so all I'm going to do is, here, I know I'm out of frame, but I'm just going to place it on there and just clamp it down. Just clamp it so that it's open, and then get a, let me lay this down right here, and just get a pipe cleaner, okay, and saturate this pipe cleaner. Now this pipe cleaner has some really hard bristle fibers interwoven in with the cotton or whatever it is, and that's all I'm going to do. Just, you know, get my pipe cleaner in there and scrub it out. That's all. Again, nothing to it, no rocket science whatsoever. Just scrub it out. Get the contact surface in there nice and clean. And there you have it. So even though this is the non-technical stuff, it's the necessary stuff to assure good connections and all that stuff. So yeah. Okay, so time for a quick audio test on the speakers. Not that it's going to translate well through YouTube and all that, but just to give you guys an idea. And I was testing them a little bit ago with some music that I like to you know, use for more critical listening. So just to give you guys an idea, you know, I have a few different pieces of vinyl, I have a few different CDs and stuff that I like to test with when I'm doing some critical listening. But I really like this Alison Krauss CD here. Obviously, a lot of you know that, Alison Krauss, Union Station, fantastic musician. She's a great vocalist. Again, the quality of recording, this CD here, the quality of it is really nice. It was well done in that I can really hear a lot of detail in it. The instrumental is very well defined, the clarity of her voice. And again, the quality of the recording is such that when I'm doing some critical listening tests, that's one CD I like to use, and that's what I was listening to a little bit earlier. Of course, I can't play that over YouTube and all that, and I really don't want to deal with all the copyright stuff, as I explained before. So I have some YouTube music, of course, burned onto a CD. So I'll just roll with that. And anyways, let me show you what I got going on. So the customer's speakers are up on the shelf up there, the rack that I normally have my speakers, the test speakers I have in the shop. You've probably seen them before. But those are the customer speakers there, that one, and then over in the dark, scary corner of doom over there, I have another one. And let's see. And then that SX950 that I was servicing the other day, I think, a matter of fact, like one video back or whatever the case, I said I was going to have it in the shop testing it for a number of days. Well, there it is. That's what I have the speakers hooked up to is that Pioneer SX950. So we'll put Pioneer with Pioneer. So Pioneer CS99 speakers with the 950. So there you go. All is good in the world. So anyways, the thing is, and one of the reasons why I don't like really working on speakers, well, there's a few reasons. As far as like reconing and working on foam surrounds and all that, I'm not a big fan of that. I've done a lot of it. I'll still do it on a case-by-case basis. But the problem is that a lot of the bigger speakers, I don't like lugging them around the shop. I'm not really set up as far as having a good listening area in the shop that I can set up a customer's big speakers so that they're positioned the way I want them positioned for testing and all that. I'm just not really set up for that anymore in this shop here in Maine. So anyways, but that's not to say that I won't work on speakers still, but I just do it on a case-by-case basis here and there. I'm limiting how many speakers I'm taking in per year. But anyways, we'll go ahead and get to the testing now. Let me go ahead and start the CD. All right, so there you go. They sound decent, they really do. CS99's never been my favorite on the planet. They're good speakers for what they are, but they sound cool. Everybody's got their preferences on that. Anyways, what I want to say is that they're working absolutely fine. I'm going to continue listening to some music for a while, but no crackle or loss of signal. That was the customer complaint, but he wanted me to recap them and all that while I was going in there and resolving any intermittent connection stuff and all that. So, hey, you know what? They're doing fantastic. They sound great for what they are. They're just not my absolute favorite speakers on the planet based on my taste. And there you go. But otherwise, everything's looking good. I'm going to keep testing them for a while. So thanks for tuning in, guys. As I always say, peace, love, music, and the vintage audio that brings it to your ears. Till next time, y'all take care.
This has been a Spinning Head production.
Hehehehe